Live now.
Mic check, 1 2 1
Time
2.
to dream.
I'm back
And
again
we
with
are
some
on
content.
it.
Mic check, 1 2 1
Time to dream. And we
from
are inspiration, motivation, aspirations, affirmations, admiration, leaps of faith, and dream more and through conversation with the Andrea of the nations. If you need some inspiration, tune into my podcast station. On air with the Andrea. On air with the Andrea.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl, DeAndrea, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Dream on Air with DeAndrea. Now, for today's episode, y'all, I have a special guest joining me today. I have none other than the Dr. Blackwell from Prairie View A&M University, and today we're going to be discussing all things hip-hop and how we as African-American consumers can kind of avoid, getting swayed or brainwashed by the media. Still keep our flavor, still keep our culture, but make sure that we are in control of that narrative. So, without further ado, can y'all please give a round of applause for Dr. Blackwell?
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining me. It's an honor to have you today, Dr. Blackwell. So, if you don't mind, could you please share a little bit about yourself and share a little bit about your journey to becoming who you are today?
Sure. My name is Derek Blackwell. I'm an associate professor of communication here at Prairie View. I've been at Prairie View since 2014, I want to say. I grew up in Victoria, Texas, which is like 2 hours, I think, south of Houston. Kind of a smaller town, maybe about 60,000 people altogether. I went to undergrad at Texas State University, which is in San Marcos. I did grad school at the University of Pennsylvania, which is in Philly. And then my first job out of grad school was here at PV. And so I've been here since then.
Fresh out the gate. And I actually went to Texas State. I was there for a semester,
Okay.
had to, I was considered that my test run, and I had to go back home and save up, try again, pay them off, and then now I'm here at PVAMU. But I really think that I made a good decision by making this my school to really, hone in on my skills and things, because I love going to school here at PV. And speaking of Dr. Blackwell, what is your favorite thing about being here at PVAMU University?
I think it's just the energy that comes with the campus, right? I went to Texas State, and that's where I got my bachelor's degree from. But I've never been back since then. And I think this is the school I've been at the longest of like anything as a student, as a professor, as anywhere. It's the longest place I've ever been. And I think there's just something about walking around the campus, walking into the classroom, and being able to maybe connect in a little bit of a different way than other spaces that I've been in. So I think the energy is one of the big selling points of being here, is being able to feel like you're a part of a community in a way that not all campuses feel that way. So yeah.
Right. It's definitely a huge community here at PV. It's a lot of experience here at PV too. And even like students, like my classmates that I meet, they're so talented. They're so full of life. I love going to school here. So, Dr. Blackwell, out of all the subjects that you teach here, could you please name those subjects for us? And what is your favorite to teach? Like, what really has your heart?
Sure. So since I've been here, some of the classes I've taught, the Introduction to Mass Comm course, which is like a freshman level intro course, broadcast writing, which is a broadcast journalism class. That's the class I've taught the most, I think. Media literacy, which is a class about media, culture, and society.
Yeah.
Comm technology, which is a class about the internet and digital media and the ways they impact culture and society. And then a class called The Message, Hip Hop as Communication, which is a class I created. So obviously that one is a little more personal to me than all the others because I built it from nothing. And so it's a passion project for me to teach that class and to work with that class. A close second, though, I would say, is media literacy. Even though I didn't develop that class, the things we talk about in there are things that really matter to me, for the most part, and that I find really interesting. And it's supposed to be a discussion-driven class, so when it works the way it's supposed to, you can have a really interesting sort of group dynamic where you hear lots of points of view and it challenges you to kind of see things differently. So yeah, those are some of the ones I like the best.
Wow, yeah. So we gonna definitely get into the message because that's hip hop studies, and y'all know I'm a rapper. You know what I'm saying? I'm a rapper, not a trapper. Period. And I really love hip hop, and so I found out actually, Taja, I had one of your old students. He was on the show with me, and she mentioned that you had played a huge part in her journey here at PVAMU, and she took one of your hip hop classes and she was like, "Yo, Dr. Blackwell is lit." I was like, "Girl, I got hip hop media literacy, man." I really enjoyed that class. And so, we kind of went off into the conversation. She was just sharing how much of an impact that was, just being in your class. And to find out that you actually started that class, that's pretty dope. Like, how was that process for you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like about my experience here at PV is that I've had the opportunity to take ideas that I have and really kind of bring them to life. And there's a freedom and flexibility, I think, within our department that allows for innovation in that way, creating something new. So creating the class, it really, I think, kind of sparked from media literacy a little bit, in that there was a summer where I taught that class. Summer's 5 weeks, it's short, but you're together for a long time each day. And it was a good group, and a lot of the conversations we had leaned, kind of in a hip hop direction. And there were a couple of students in there who were like, "Man, we should have a whole class that's like just this, right?" And I was like, "Well, I mean, I'll think about it and see if maybe it's something that the department would support." And so, the way our department is structured, you can create what are called special topics classes, which is kind of like a new idea that's not in the curriculum that you basically make a syllabus for, and if the department signs off on it, then you're able to offer it for a semester and kind of see how it goes. And so that was how the class started, as a special topics that I developed around the themes of hip hop. And it was a successful class that first time, and I was able to do it a couple more times as a special topics. And at that point, I was encouraged to just make it like a permanent part of the curriculum.
Of course, yeah.
And so it's a more detailed process to get that approved, but we went through that process and it got approved. And this past spring was actually the first time that the class was like on the books as like a part of the curriculum, not a special topics, but its own thing. And so yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of spending time reading stuff from kind of the world of hip hop studies, reflecting on ways to connect these kind of scholarly ideas to like the music of right now, because it's not really a hip hop history class. People sometimes expect it to be that, and there is an element of that. We talk about the history, but the class is really thinking about how hip hop becomes this communication tool that both reflects the culture and society around us. In other words, what you see in hip hop mirrors what you see in the world, but it also is a shaper of culture and society. So the things that hip hop puts out there influence the culture and the society, so that people are, dressing a certain way, talking a certain way, sometimes engaging in certain kinds of activities because of the influence that hip hop has had on them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of topics you can approach from that perspective, so that it's about hip hop, but it actually is about a bunch of other stuff along the way.
One thing that I really noticed from what you said was how, it started as an idea. And I'm really glad that you acted upon that idea. I feel like sometimes a lot of people, they dream big and they're like, "Man, what if this or what if that, or it'll be nice if," and it just stays right there.
Yeah.
But it's like, once you take the actions to bring that idea to life, who knows what can happen. Like, as Dr. Blackwell shared, it started off as an idea and as a conversation between his students and him. And then now it's a full course. It's a permanent course that students can take here at PVAMU. So I think that's pretty dope. And so what is hip hop? Like, what would you define hip hop as? What does that mean to you?
Sure. So In my class, we talk about hip hop as a culture that most sort of historians of hip hop um, divide into four key elements, sometimes five. So the one that people are most familiar with is probably rapping,
Yeah.
but there's also DJing, which if you look at hip hop's history, DJing and the DJ were kind of the centerpiece of hip hop before rapping.
Yeah.
And the DJ kind of becomes a background figure later on, but the DJ was the star in early hip hop. Um, Breakdancing is another key element of hip hop, and then graffiti writing is the fourth. Now, the fifth that people sometimes acknowledge and that I really emphasize because obviously of the class that I teach is knowledge. And so some of the founding fathers of hip hop talk about knowledge as central to hip hop's culture. Knowledge of self, that is, who we are and where we come from. And in a class like mine, part of what we do is use hip hop as a tool for kind of cultivating a broader range of knowledge. If you look at, hip hop and rap music compared to other genres, there are a lot more words in a rap song than there are in most rock songs, most country songs, most R&B songs because of the structure of the songs, right? And so you're able to say a lot in one song. And many artists are using that platform as a space to really communicate things about life, the world, history, society, that if you pay attention to those words, you can really learn a lot from. And so part of what we do in my class is try to learn just as much from artists as we're learning from scholars, because even though their tools and methods are different, oftentimes their messages are equally relevant and sometimes profound.
Yes, it's definitely heavy on the profound. It's like I love hip hop because no matter what genre of hip hop it is, like you said, there's always that story there. There's always that heartfelt moment. Even somebody sharing their background or where they come from or what they're used to, you can learn a lot through hip hop. And one thing that is heavy on my heart, even as a hip hop artist, is to step outside of the stereotypes or the judgment that hip hop gets and really listen to what the artists are sharing in their songs. And it's like you mentioned, hip hop is wordy, and a lot of artists, they don't get in there just saying these words just for no reason. They actually want you to hear what they're saying. Like, and a lot of artists, that's for me, I will speak for myself, hip hop is an escape for me. And even like you said, just writing about my experiences, writing about what I desire to see in the world, writing about what I have seen in the world, and being able to put that on top of a beat and mix it and just sing, like it's really therapeutic. Like, hip hop is so dope to me and I love it. And so that's another reason why I wanted to have you on the show today, is because you actually study this, you actually teach this, and you actually help people appreciate the art. So I think that's pretty dope. And so what is your favorite thing about hip hop, and what is your favorite genre of hip hop?
So favorite thing about hip hop, I think probably goes back to some of what I was saying earlier about its ability to communicate certain types of ideas in ways that I think are very unique to just art in general. I think the ways that hip hop kind of plays with language and pushes language are a big part of what I'm interested in. Obviously a lot of slang kind of comes from hip hop and then kind of spreads to the masses over time. But I just have a deep appreciation for creativity in general. And I think that there are so many examples in hip hop of things that just kind of leave me in awe a little bit of what artists are able to do with words and with music in general. I guess one other thing I'll add on to that is hip hop is oftentimes sample based, that is taking old musical recordings and doing something new with them. And so the ways that hip hop references itself, references other aspects of Black culture and Black music, I think that all those connections that you find just analyzing even just one song sometimes are really fascinating to me. Your second question was about my favorite.
Well, I would say subgenre, because hip hop is a genre
of hip hop.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
you like trap music.
I listen to some of it. I wouldn't call it my favorite subgenre. I think my favorite subgenre is probably more in the realm of the soul samples, the boom bap, the kind of the stuff that I think still has relevance even today. Like Drake's album, like that 8 a.m. in Charlotte record is like it's a sample based kind of boom bap style rap, and like that's my favorite Drake is when he does that kind of stuff. Even though I like some of the other things that are happening and new sounds and stuff like that, I think that there's something about that version of it. Probably that has to do with just my personal journey with hip hop, and maybe that being the thing that I connected with first. Mm-hmm. And so it has like a place, a personal place in my heart in terms of things I like as a fan. But yeah, I mean, being a college professor, part of the benefit is that you're around young energy all the time. And part of what I'm always looking to do is, even with stuff that I might not immediately be a fan of, if I have a student who like really loves it, I want to know where their connections are and why it's so meaningful to them. And when you're around somebody who like is really passionate about a thing, it oftentimes rubs off. At the very least, you appreciate or understand like why they love it, even if it doesn't mean to you what it means to them. And so it helps me to just kind of stay connected to even the latest versions of what's happening in hip hop, just being around people who are experiencing these things at a different point in their lives. So yeah.
And one thing I noticed too, like recent hip hop, it's I don't want to say ever changing, but it's changing a lot. Like we hearing new styles, new sounds, even with some reoccurring, like for example the samples that you mentioned, they starting to bring samples back. And another person that I really like was Kanye. Kanye really was big on sampling, and I don't want to say he was the first, but I think I listened to Kanye when I was younger, so he was the one who had the influence. Like that was who, he was popping when I was coming up, and he was in his prime when I was growing up. And so just even being able to hear the samples that he did, and even with Jesus Walks, songs like that, I like to sing. So I would sing the Jesus Walk with me, in the background, and I thought that was so dope. And Kanye is somebody that I really aspire to work with him one day. Yeah. So who is your favorite artist, and who is somebody that whose art do you really respect in hip hop, and why?
I mean, well, I have to connect to your last comment, and that is from like a pure music perspective. Kanye's music is my favorite music as far as hip hop goes. Now, he's a controversial figure for obvious reasons. There are things about his personal life that, I just don't agree with, right? But I think if we're just talking about music, what I appreciate about Kanye is like the highs of like his highest moments are something that I feel like very few artists in hip hop have been able to match musically. And he's somebody who, especially if you look at the early stages of his career, it still manifests itself now in different ways, but he's somebody who like really, really, really cares about like every aspect of his art and pours so much into it that you can see it in some of those projects that he was putting out in the earlier stages of his career. In today's time, when I think the way music is made has shifted a little bit. A lot of things it's about coming out quickly and releasing stuff as quickly, just kind of keeping your name in the conversation by putting stuff out all the time. I think part of what you see is sometimes a compromising maybe in quality, because there's just a little bit less like energy that goes into making sure a thing is perfect. And I'm like, I really care a lot about quality just in everything. If I'm gonna get in front of an audience and teach a class, I want it to be like the best possible version of it that I can do. And I feel like his music reflects that sort of worldview that I can connect with. And the music, it just gives me a feeling that very few other artists have been able to match quite like that. So favorite music, I have to say Kanye. In terms of like other artists I would talk about, I mean, I'm a big fan of Tyler, the Creator, and I think that he in some ways has a Kanye-like energy about him, both in terms of really caring and like putting everything into his work in terms of reinventing himself and trying new sounds and existing outside of whatever the like hot sound of the moment is. Like his stuff sounds like him and isn't deeply affected by the trends of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm a fan of him. I'm, I'm a fan of what J. Cole is doing right now, in that I think he's an artist who's kind of been around for a good amount of time now in the same ways as your Kanye, Drake, and whoever. But what's interesting about J. Cole to me is I actually think he's a better rapper now than maybe he's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you're really successful at something, it can be hard to like be deeply focused on getting better because you've already gotten all the accolades and praise and money and like your life is easier. But in spite of all those things, it seems like when you like listen to the music he's putting out, even in guest verses and stuff like that, it's like, oh, this is somebody who's like still trying to get better than he was on the last thing. And so you can't say that about everybody, but I think he's somebody who does that well.
Yeah, and even hearing the things that you pointed out about them, it kind of makes me self-reflect too. Like, I can relate to that pressure of having to constantly put out music. When you kind of like rushing and just trying to throw out and put out music, it kind of takes away from the love of what you're doing because it feels like a job. Versus as you're creating, as you're taking the time to make art. And I did, and it is another thing that you pointed out too was even with Kanye, like how he takes his time and he actually cares about his art, even from the mixing to the sound to the lyricism to the vocals, all of that. Like he takes his time and he puts his expertise into it, and it is evident in what he puts out. I know like a few projects of mine, I think I was so pressured to put out songs that I was mixing and I was like, okay, whatever, it's just gonna have to sound whatever. But now I go back and I listen to those songs, I'm like, girl, you coulda waited. You coulda took your time. You coulda mixed this a little bit better because it is all about the presentation. Even with the engineering side of music is so important too. So I'm grateful for the courses here at PV that kind of teach us how to mix and pay attention to those sound levels because you can have a good song, but if the mix is bad, it just helps to have a good mix. So to all my artists, the reason why I'm elaborating on this is don't feel so pressured to just throw out anything. This is your craft, this is your baby. Take your time with your music and your projects and make sure that you're satisfied with the quality of it. And so Dr. Blackwell, one thing that I really want to talk about too is the stereotypes of hip hop and how it's popular to see a lot of drugs and alcohol and reckless living or reckless lyrics, and especially women, and feeling like even me as a rapper feeling pressured to walk on stage and be fully clothed because I know that it's not really popular to do so. Like, how do we as artists kind of avoid getting caught up in the stereotypes of hip hop? And yeah, like what advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we gotta recognize is that music is an art, but it's also a business. And so the music business is one that in some ways is notorious for being kind of a shady business, right? You hear about artists who they end up in bad deals and they're not getting paid properly and this and that. And it's the same companies and people who are behind those sorts of things that is, exploiting people for money in ways that benefit the label but not the artist. I mean, the same sorts of things are at work when we talk about what gets elevated or kind of pushed to the forefront, right? And so in a class like the hip hop class, in a class like media literacy, sometimes what we talk about is like ownership and who controls these companies. And we think about hip hop as largely like a black art form. But as a business, the people who run that business are not always people from black communities. And their priorities and interests, are business interests. That is, what's going to make money. What's going to get clicks, what's going to get views, what's going to go viral. And, we all know that the stuff that gets that kind of attention tends to look and sound a certain way, including in hip hop. And so you can get sort of a short-term positive reinforcement for those kind of stereotypes, right? You can get a quick, oh, I posted the thing and it went viral today. or I posted the thing and it got a bunch of plays, in a short time frame. But part of where, if you're an artist, part of what you got to think about is kind of you you are your brand, you are your legacy, you are to the label a product that they're trying to push and sell. And so it's easy to kind of get caught up in whatever the popular trends are, which sometimes end up being these negative stereotypes that really go back generations long before hip hop. This is just kind of the hip hop version of them. But recognizing that eventually you'll have to look back at like your catalog, your legacy, your body of work,
75 years old,
and ask yourself, sure, every 75-year-old looks back at 20-year-old them and sees certain things they wouldn't have done or would have done differently. That's to be expected. But when it comes to an artist who really cares about what they're doing, really is trying to put themselves into their work and really go all in, I think part of what you got to think about is, who am I trying to please and to appease? And the people who are clicking on your stuff because it's viral and it's going to fit some of these stereotypes, it's not that they're necessarily a fan of what you're doing all the time. It might just be that it caught their eye for other reasons. And so when you look at some of those artists who really have a fan base that's loyal to them and to what they do, oftentimes it's something that requires a deeper connection. And it might not mean everything they post goes viral, but it might mean every time they tour, it's full. And every time they have something to sell, people are willing to spend money on them because there's a real connection, and not just oh, this is, funny, or oh, this is, it's attention getting, but oh, this is meaningful to me. And so part of what I tried to do in my own life and with my own work and how I ended up being a professor was I wanted to do something that I found meaningful. And I think for a lot of artists, they can relate to that. They find meaning in making their art. And so if you find meaning in making it, why not make something that is meaningful to the people who consume it?
Wow, that is beautiful. You need to put that in my notes. And I really like how you said that we have to really, it sounded like it's within. It's like not going into the media like, oh, I have to, conform to this. It's like taking that mental note and saying like, what do I bring to the table? What's important to me? What message am I trying to give? Like, what is my brand? Who am I? And not conforming from that, because honestly, like, there's something for everybody, and what's popular may not be for everybody, but you can still step in with something new, with something fresh, with something moral, I would say, and still attract an audience, and it could become popular. So that's what I got from what you were just saying. Dr. Blackwell, as African American consumers, what influences do we have on the entertainment industry, and how can we use that to our advantage about the type of media that is produced to us and the type of media that we consume?
So I think sometimes we underestimate kind of our power as consumers, or our influence as consumers. If you look at like the history of hip hop was just kind of a grassroots movement before it was an industry that made any money at all. It was something that people were doing, and business people came to it to say, oh, how can we take this and sell it to a broader audience? And so if that's the history of where it comes from, then what that suggests is that the people have the ability, the reason it's appealing to begin with is because of us, because of the communities where this music comes from.
Yeah.
And if we decide that we're tired of this or that, like, the industry will eventually see it's no longer profitable to continue to give people this or that, and they'll move and shift. And pop culture, Black culture, oftentimes dictates a lot of what's cool, a lot of what's popular. We look at the slang people use, the way they dress, the music that's popular. A lot of times it's us driving these different trends. And so I think that the question is like, what trends do we want to make popular? What things do we want to make hot? Because even looking at Black history, like, stories like the bus boycott, Montgomery bus boycott, that's like people saying, hey, we have consumer power and we're going to use it to make a stand, to make a statement. Something more relatable might just be Black Lives Matter, right? It's not a consumer movement, but it functions similarly in that it shows the power of people to come together around a cause and say, look, we're tired of this or that, or we want to be heard in these ways. And if enough people get on board, all of a sudden the world kind of catches up to it. And so I think that the the question is, how are you using your consumer power? Because sometimes we'll say, I'm tired of this, or this is all everything sounds the same, or everybody's doing the same old thing and it's negative and whatever, but we're still clicking it. We're still listening to it. We're still getting the streams up for it.
Still buying the tickets.
And so, right. And so what businesses look at is those measurable outcomes, not what I'm saying to my friend in my room or in the MSC. And so if we are interested in seeing something different, the only way to get their attention is to make different decisions as a consumer. I think alongside it, the other thing that we have the privilege of is with social media, we can amplify our voices very easily. And so the same way that Black Lives Matter spreads largely through social media expressions, if there are enough people who are like, look, we are tired of this or that negative stereotype in hip hop, we're not going to support it anymore, and we encourage other people to get on board with that movement, hashtag it, whatever you want to hashtag it. I mean, eventually, when enough people get on board, the businesses have to pay attention to it, because if they don't, they end up falling by the wayside, becoming irrelevant, losing money, and they care about that, so they'll respond if that's what the risk is.
Yeah, and it's I felt empowered. It's giving Black activism. But the reason why I asked you that question is because it's very important to me, just how we present ourselves. And I know how impactful hip hop is on society. I know how important it is to make sure that we are giving the younger generation something meaningful, something powerful, giving them morale to look up to. I hope I said that right. But my generation, my younger generations have been really heavy on my heart, just even how we are the future. And it's like we're going to be the ones that pass down what we know to the younger generation. So with hip hop being so important to me, and if we keep going with, the stereotypes of, and this is no shade, to y'all, my personal preference is just like, what are we teaching the kids? Like, what are we teaching our culture? What are we teaching our youth that is okay or not when they grow up? And we know how impactful music is to us. And to some people, they may know, it's just a song, but it's like, it's not just a song, because it also goes into the power of our words, right? And what we say, we're literally reciting lyrics that we hear. We're literally reciting lifestyles, right? And it's like subconsciously, you are reiterating the things that you hear. And I don't think that we talk about this enough. Just even not only in hip hop. This is for multiple genres. But it's like, what kind of messages are we spreading here? What kind of role models are we being for the new generation? Like, what are we giving to them? We need to care about these babies. We need to care about. We need to teach them how to love themselves, how to use their gifts for the greater good of society, for their families, making sure that we are creating a good reputation for ourselves. Because I understand that hip hop is also it's a business. Well, not just hip hop, but music, I would say, is a business, and people care about the money. But it's like we can care about the money and still care about the legacy that we're leaving too. And I feel like we need to kind of get ahead of this. Like, I feel like the media plays a big part in the stereotyping that we as Black people get and how we are viewed by other cultures. And some people don't care about that, but it's like they feed us these narratives and they feed us these trends, or they invest in these things because like this is how they see us. And it's like if all we are known for is our bodies and drugs and drinking and all of this stuff, then what does that say about us as a culture and what we tolerate? Because we're Black people, we're more than that. And these are the things that have been heavy on my heart. And it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I want to talk about it. I want to be impactful in the industry and kind of have more conversations about this. This is just something that I keep in mind, even when making music of my own. Now I understand, everybody, do what you do, but at the same time, let's keep this in mind too, as we're creating as well. But yeah, that's just been real heavy on my heart, man. And I really care about the future. Like, I care about the younger generations that are coming up after us. Like, we need some more positive role models out there. I'm not saying that is none, but one artist I will say that I look up to is Lauryn Hill. And Dr. Blackwell is crazy because I grew up listening to her, and her music was real catchy, and we listening to doo-wop and all of these things, and then I listened to her song. She has a song called Adam Lives in Theory. And I was like, yo, she's talking about God and humanity in her songs. And it's like, I didn't know that. Even with doo-wop, like that was a good song. She's teaching women and men how to respect themselves and to not be, used for just your body, or not being manipulated by other people. Like, have some self-respect. But she did it in such a creative and impactful way that, like, she still had people like crunk and jamming and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, it shows you that people sometimes rule out certain paths artistically because they think, well, that'll never be successful on the same level. That'll never like be a hit. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, like it won all kinds of Grammys that year. I believe it's the first hip hop album to win Album of the Year ever, and it won several other awards alongside that. And so it demonstrates, and if you look at the lyrical content of the album, there's a lot of spiritual talk on that album, in ways that aren't always like hit you over the head in terms of the way they're delivered, but it's there. And for those who are listening closely and who are invested in the music, you get those messages. And so she shows that you could be, I mean, she was on the cover of like every magazine. She was a superstar at that point, making music that reflected her morals and values at the time. And, there are plenty of artists who maybe from like a morals and values standpoint are pretty closely aligned with who Lauryn Hill is, but when it comes to their like artistic persona, they have to put forth a different thing because they feel like that's what's going to be successful. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. I think what you're talking about related to like younger generations and just perceptions of who we are to the broader world. I mean, it's part of what a class like media literacy is all about, and just the whole concept of media literacy is this idea of being able to understand the kind of complex roots that underlie the media that we engage with, right? So that we're not just taking the stuff at face value, we're thinking about it critically. And it's possible to like listen to a song and be a fan of a song and totally disagree with like I do that, right? There's music that I listen to that people might think like, you like that song? And I'm like, just as music, as entertainment, yeah. I'm able to like look at this and know what it is and know that I have my own life that looks very different from that. And I have no interest in a life that looks like this, but musically there's something about it that draws me. But when it comes to like those things that you asked me what my favorites are, like what I'm a deep fan of, like the things I connect with are going to be things that maybe relate more to who I am and how I see myself. And so giving people the ability to separate and sift through that, I think, is important, and especially for younger people. One of the things that's changed, even though there's been explicit rap music since the very early days of rap music, everything is just way more accessible than it used to be. I mean, I'm old enough that when I was a kid, there were songs that like I had never heard the explicit version of before. I had only seen it on TV or heard like the radio version, and to get the explicit version, I would have had to just like buy the album. Whereas now everything's on the internet, and so like, the video, the music, everything has shifted in a direction of we don't really have to make a clean version of anything because everything lives on the internet where there aren't the same sorts of rules. And so for a grown adult or even a college student, that's one thing. But for
a 5-year-old,
a kid who just likes music and heard a song on TV and wants to find it on YouTube or whatever, like there's a different level of vulnerability, and there are fewer protections to be like other than the parents doing what they can to kind of guard their media use. But even a diligent parent, you just can't control everything, and so there's exposure to things that oftentimes is happening much earlier now than maybe what it used to look like.
Yeah. And so with that exposure of the things in the media, like what can we as consumers do to kind of prevent ourselves from being caught up in the overly exposure of what's accessible on the internet? Like, what are some tools, what are some steps that we can take to, kind of protect ourselves from, just seeing, coming across anything? Because, like, for example, you get on TikTok, you could just be minding your little old business, and then boom, you just see something, you like, whoa, I did not need to see that, I did not want to see that. Like, so what, and we can't really control what is put on the media, but what can we as consumers do to kind of guard ourselves from, the brainwashing or the things that get exposed on social media?
I think maybe the biggest thing would be to recognize that these things are not completely out of our control. People sometimes feel like they have no choice. This is the direction the world is moving in, and there's nothing they can do about it, and so they don't even really try to do anything about it, even on an individual level. Um, for me personally, one of the things that, and like anybody, I've had like successes and failures with this, but just trying to regulate the time that I spend with certain kinds of media is a step that I'm always kind of wrestling with and trying to take. And even if it's not always about like how many hours I'm spending with something, sometimes it's just about when am I going to engage with, like when am I going to open up the timeline and see what's there. If it's the first thing I do when I open my eyes, that's probably not a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
If it's the last thing I do before I close my eyes, that's probably not a good choice either. Um, if you decide for yourself what are the things that are important to you in life, and take steps to kind of build your life around those things, part of it might include regulating your kind of media engagement. I think the other thing that I've had to do, like I took a kind of extended break from Instagram and then went back to it recently, it is really take advantage of the fact that while we don't have complete control over social media, there is an extent to which we kind of create the environment of our social media page. That is, by choosing who to follow or not to follow. The recommendations we get are based on the choices we've made in the past,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know there's things that these algorithms are doing to kind of pull us in certain directions. And sometimes it's like, wait, I don't follow anything like this. Why are they throwing this at me? Like, that's going to happen. But there's an influence that we have that's going to shape the kinds of things that get recommended to me over time. And so I can create a social media space that aligns with my values, my priorities, my interests, and be diligently fending off the things that kind of creep onto the timeline that are not. You say, I'm not interested in this kind of post, or whatever. But it takes work. If you just kind of go with the flow, which is what I think so many people are doing in so many areas of their lives, going with the flow will only take you but so far, and the direction it takes you in is one that you may or may not want to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to kind of dictate the flow for yourself and for your own life. And there are things we can do to kind of exert some level of control, even if it's not total control.
Yeah, that was good. And another thing I thought about too is like how we can follow hashtags. Like certain hashtags are the things that we're interested in. We can just go ahead and follow that, and like you said, kind of guide ourselves through picking what we would like to see on our social media pages and whatnot. So, Dr. Blackwell, thank you so much for joining me today. I have one more question for you. So, if there was any advice that you can give an artist or a content creator who desires to have a career in the entertainment industry, what would that advice be?
I mean, it's hard to boil it down to one, but I think one of the most important, I would say, is that the industry and the trends that accompany that industry, they're constantly changing and shifting. And if you're chasing trends and chasing, whatever the hot thing of the moment is, it's going to wear you out over time. A challenge that's true not just of artists but of people, and I think especially for like college students, it's a relevant thing, is this challenge of like, what identity am I going to put into the world? And we very often are looking for certain kinds of validation or support, to kind of make us feel good about who we are and how we present ourselves. But ultimately, being your authentic self is so much easier than performing the identity that you think people want to see from you.
Wow.
And as an artist, that's a real, sometimes difficult decision to make, because sometimes my authentic self is not the trend of the moment. It's not the thing that's popping. But if I'm chasing the trend just to be accepted, oftentimes what's going to happen is by the time I get the acceptance, the new trend has come in. And so now I got to learn how to be a different version, you know, of what I worked so hard to get this thing right, and now I got to be another thing. Whereas if I'm just me, there's not a whole lot of work in being myself. It comes naturally.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's about seeking out the people who can appreciate the authentic you. And that's the work of the artist, right? So, you know, I can think of lots of examples of artists who let the trend kind of come to them. And if you do things at a high level, if your work is really great, then people are going to bend to it. And I think that there's, again, like countless examples of artists who are doing stuff that had nothing to do with what was popular at the time, but people noticed it because sometimes because it was fresh and different. But even more importantly, if the quality is there, it's like, oh, well, like, even if this is different or this isn't what I like personally relate to fully, like as art, as music, there's something about it that's special. And so just get good at your craft, and you know, the identity stuff, let it flow naturally.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was some great advice, y'all. So once again, stay true to yourself, and you know, don't really get caught up in the trends. You know, be your own trend. And yeah, you know, when you rock with yourself, you know, it's kind of hard for others not to, and if they don't, then it's cool because you know who you are. And that is, you know, the moral of today's episode. Once again, thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Blackwell. You did an amazing job. I appreciate it. Once again, I'm honored to have you on the show. And until next time, y'all take it easy. Remember to be blessed, stay out of that mess. And we out.
That was good.